Aloha, everyone. Today is June 21st, 2016, and I thought I would share with you a little bit about altars and crystals and things of that nature. Here you see me sitting on my lanai on Kauai with some of the crystal skulls that form the main matrix of the Osiris Arising project. And there are a few Andara crystals there, and a scarab and some other things. Everyone that's listening to this probably has an altar, or at the very least has things to put onto an altar that they'd like to fix and do, And creating an altar is a very personal thing, so this is certainly not a how-to on how to create your altar, because it's a very individual and personal spiritual journey to just create it. And then when you have it, there are times you want to change it. Just like you're feeling another level of experience and you'd like to rearrange or add to or subtract from the altar that you have. Of course, then there's the matter of space and place. If you're living in a very small space, it's difficult to put together the altar that you might really like to share with your inner self. So all these things are considerations. I'm going to flip through some pictures here. Now, I currently live in a place where I don't have, even though it's a very spacious place, there isn't the furniture that I need for this, really. So I have placed them on various levels of a cabinet and a few other little places. So I've really spread it out. I have several altars, you might say, in my bedroom. This is the lower level of the cabinet. And here I've placed things that are more grounded, energy of a grounding nature. Some of them are, the ancient mask that came from the Dead Sea. It's an actual artifact. And, the metallic cross that came out of an old Byzantine church. Some crystals that I felt were, one is by the feet of Thoth there. It came from near the Giza pyramid. And this other large piece of jade with amethyst comes from China. It's a very light engendered. All these are very light engendering, but for whatever reasons, I felt they were grounded enough. Grounding energy to place them in this in this pattern. So that's the lower level, closest to the ground, anchoring the tier, shall we say, of the whole process. And the mid-level, I have some of my crystal skulls and other pieces that are really the most active part of my altar is the mid-level. I feel the activity, the energy, the things that I work with are most specifically on this level. However, there wasn't really enough room for all of it. So on this next level, I still have more of things that I do work with, but these particular skulls and whatever, these are the stellar skulls. They aren't the dwellers. The dwellers are below. So they aren't quite as in activity as the ones below. And then we move up to the top tier, and I had a few things left over. So I put these here, but also I felt that there's a big chunk there of another, more of the white jade from China. And the statues, one I bought in Montserrat when I visited Spain, and the other is, that's the Virgin with the Child, the Black Madonna. And on the other side is Sekhmet, which I got in Egypt when I was in Egypt. And I kind of set them up there as guardians. Well, there are plenty of guardians here, of course, because even this lower level, as you can see peeking up from above, or the mid-level, has one of the statues there. So I had to play with it, to get it what I felt. But it felt right that these were the upper level guardians, like the inner secret chamber, sort of, at the top of the vault. And or even the capstone, And then, going back down, we had the mid-level where the most activity is, and the lower, whoops, no, I missed something. That's the secondary mid-level. This is the mid-level where the most activity is, but both of these really have a lot of activity. And then, of course, this is the lower grounding level. So that was how I worked with these cabinets, this cabinet. But then, this is the whole thing. So you can see it kind of all together. And no, this is the next one. I'm sorry. This one is another cabinet. And I sort of did the same thing with this in regard to what was placed where, but this has a little bit different energy to it. The second to top level is very personal for me. It has pictures of me and my mother. It has little things that people have given me that are very sentimental to me. And the jar has the feathers from our white dove when Simeon and I own two beautiful white doves, and these are the feathers that are left. And then the third one down are things that have been given me that I treasure. And going down again, we have some other things that were given to me that I treasure, plus some very interesting crystals and things. And the very last level, much the same thing. So this is kind of my treasure shelf. Even the one above, it has things that are especially related to me personally in some ways. Then we go over here, and this is the final one. And it's kind of what's left. I'll admit that. So it's a mixture, but it's also a very visible display. It's open. I feel that this area, when it's totally open like this, is kind of the messenger. It receives and sends signals, you might say. It kind of just displays the energy of the whole room, of all of the altars in the room. And it opens up. It's expansive. Some altars you want to kind of sequester. Some you have to sequester if you don't have room for them anyplace else. But some you kind of want to keep in a little cubby hole, And others you want to just expand out and reach out. And this one is the more reaching one. And the Sphinx statue in the center is one of the treasures that came from the Dead Sea. It's an actual artifact. And I feel that she, is obviously a she, holds presence for the whole thing, really, the room, everything. It's a very strong presence. Two of my artworks there, the larger picture, and then the one with the triangle in it. And you can't see because of the reflection, but the other artwork was given to me by a friend who lives here on the property, and he did that artwork. So that's what we have here. Now, we proceed to when I had the ceremony recently on May 29th out on the lanai, and here all the main skulls facing Mount Waialeale, where the White Queen skull, she is hosting the energies for the actual dweller skull of the White Queen that is in Mount Waialeale, that was incarnated in many forms, including Mary Magdalene and Nephilus from the historical past. So, and then, we have some more pictures. Oh, this is going back. Now, this goes back to my other home where I left in January to move to the one I'm in now. And it had this neat little cabinet that I could put things in this way. And I really liked that cabinet, but it wasn't mine, so I couldn't take it with me. So this is how I did it there. And here you can see the whole troop there on the top, and they're just beaming and smiling at you. And below you have the lesser skulls. I say lesser. They're smaller, and they're not dwellers or anything. I think Thoth calls them, mana skulls or something. I can't remember the name he uses, but they ping off of certain nodes on the planet. And I have them and some of my other things, that I feel are very resonant with all that energy on that level. That's how I kept them there. And here we're going way back to Crestone, Colorado, back in the 1990s. And you can see the format here we've established with many statues and crystals and things all lined up. Each one has a specific, there's a specific energy involved in setting them up in this way. And a lot of forethought went into it. This is another altar in the same room in Crestone. We had a whole small cabin just dedicated to our offices and our altar room. It was really, really nice. Those were the good old days. And we lived right next door in another little A-frame thing. So really combined, it was no larger than kind of a mid-sized house because they were both rather small. But we had room for everything that way. And those were the days in the place where you could afford that kind of thing and not, it was very inexpensive compared to how we're living now and how I'm living now here in Kauai. It's unbelievable, the difference. But anyway, we were able to do this then. And this was more dedicated to the Egyptian energy, as you can tell. This particular altar was very Egyptian. And a lot of the things we brought back from Egypt with us were placed here. Now, here is on some land that was given to us, and we later sold to move onward. But at the time, it was very sacred land. We didn't live on it. We did sacred ceremony and whatever, and it was passed to the Buddhists, I believe, that have a monastery there. I think it was the Buddhists. I'm not sure. There's a whole conglomerate of different, mostly Eastern religions that have enclaves there, not conclaves, but enclaves in that area. And so it's still sacred land. We didn't sell it for apartments or anything like that. But at the time, we created this sacred circle. Now, this is a type of altar. It's a ground altar. It's an earth altar. And so I just wanted you to see how it came together. The pole in the center was created by a very dear friend of ours in that area. He doesn't live there now, but he did when we did. And Raymond. And he does beautiful work, and this was the centerpiece. And I believe we left all of this here on the land as it is here. Now, obviously, probably not there now, but that's how it was at the time. Now, this is way, way back. This is in the 1980s in my home in Texas. As you can see, I've been doing this for a long time. And this altar was dedicated to the white rose unicorn. I have a manuscript called the White Rose, actually it's the Black Rose Unicorn at the time, because we're dealing with certain Davic energies, and they changed from black to white, symbolically and esoterically speaking. So this altar started out as dedicated to the Black Rose Unicorn, and when it shifted, it became dedicated to the White Rose Unicorn. And these are energies that are, quantum physics, you can call it on one level, but they're also, in the Davic realm, they're entity beings that are working with the Christic forces of nature. So that's what this altar was all about. I used to have gatherings in the home, and we did certain energy work and whatever, in regard to in that room. So that's what the altar sort of kept and maintained. Now this is a close-up of the altar when it shifted again, and this is a Grail cup. Unicorn horn. As you can see, it's an incredible piece of work, and it was done by a woman named Susan Plum. She also did the wand that you see lying next to it there. Unfortunately, this cup, all of these were eventually broken through the many, many moves in time, no matter how carefully I packed them or whatever. They were delicate pieces, very delicate, so I no longer have them. But as you can see, it was a beautiful piece, and this altar was growing, changing all the time. It was still in a unicornic Davic energy field, but it was changing. And this is my reason for showing all of these things to you, to show you how these things change and move and are redirected in various currents and energies. Now, this was before we had a Facebook wall. So in those days, I had a wall. I wouldn't recommend doing this now unless, of course, you own the house and you're not concerned about a zillion tacks in the walls when you have to take all these pictures down at some point. But I did put them up at the time, and the lady who was our dear friend who owned the house allowed me to do it. So, and I would change the pictures. I mean, there would some that come down and then others would go up and, change around, because I was kind of like, Richard Dreyfuss in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind with the mashed potatoes. I had to do it, and I didn't know any other way to do it. So I just started tacking. Now, of course, now I don't need to do that. I have other means to satisfy this spiritual lust within. But that's how it came about in those days. Now here is another altar, and I didn't create this one for sure. This is Simeon and I with our group that we facilitated in Egypt in 1997. And this is, of course, in the Temple of Philae. It is Isis altar in the Temple of Philae. Now, Philae was actually, brick by brick, moved from its original location to this location where we're standing here, which is unfortunate, but they wanted to build a dam, so they moved it on over. And the energy there, the bricks and the walls, and you can feel the energy there, but there's something missing. I'm not saying that it wasn't wonderful. It really is. And if you're ever to Egypt, please go there. It's an incredible place. But when we went to the actual land that was mostly underwater, and this one little tiny little bit they took the boat to, and you could like walk out and stand on the land, oh, you could feel it. So, it's been separated from its anchor. So it's still wonderful. It still contains a lot of energy in the bricks and the energy of, what it went through and the place it came from. But it's not the same, I would be willing to bet you, that it was when it was constructed on its original location. Okay, we're back to the first show again. So that's kind of how it has worked for me. And maybe, I'm obviously the altar queen here, where you can see I've just been altarizing for years. And maybe you don't feel the urge to do that. Maybe you want just, a little candle and a crystal and whatever, and that, sort of a Zen thing. And that is perfectly beautiful and wonderful. You don't have to get this fancy. But it's just me, what I wanted to do and continue to do. And I do have my Thothic guidance in regard to the energies I specifically work with. So altars can come in all shapes and sizes and all kinds and all places, and can be there for different reasons. So, but the important thing, I believe, in all of this is to remember that your heart is speaking to you as to what you wish to do with it. And don't feel like, oh, well, maybe because so-and-so has an altar that looks like this, maybe I should. It's like, no, it's really important for you to follow your heart if indeed you feel like you need to have an altar at all. If it's inside, if it's outside, if you want 3 altars, 1 altar, an altar and a half, whatever you want, just follow your own inner guidance. And it's an evolutionary thing. It evolves. So one turns into another, maybe through years of time, maybe through months or even weeks of time. You're extending into a physical perimeter, your spiritual focus. And it's in turn helping you to more anchor and develop that spiritual focus within, if indeed that's your path to do altars at all. Many people just don't, they don't need them. And I shouldn't say need. It's not so much a need, but they don't feel the guidance within to create them, and that's fine too. But for those of us who feel really called to do altars, the people I'm addressing here. And okay, when you're dealing with crystals, for instance, there's a lot out there about, well, you need to cleanse your crystals frequently and whatever. Oh my gosh, if I had tried to cleanse all my crystals frequently or any at all, that's all I would be doing. And Thoth told me very, very plainly that crystals, in most instances, crystals do not need to be cleansed. They cleanse themselves, especially when they come into your field. And you can boost that by simply holding the crystal and saying, in a one-time thing, when you first get the crystal, I wish to just align this crystal to myself, and anything extraneous that does not benefit me in this, please release. And just do it once, and that's it. And if you feel your crystal has been exposed to something you would rather not, just do it again. But, getting out the salt and the water and cleansing and going through, you really just don't need to do that. This is from, of course, my Thothic perspective. There are other people that might say things differently. So, you need to feel what's right for you. But I'm just sharing with you that what I work with and the Thothic perspective on that. Now, the difference between like a natural crystal and one that's carved, like a crystal skull or a double terminated that's carved, with sides and faceted or something like that. The natural one is going to have a lot more earth resonance, obviously. I think that's a no-brainer, to the ones that are crafted. But the ones that are carved with specific forethought into facets or shapes like the skulls, they have more of a stellar frequency. That doesn't mean they don't have an earth frequency, but it's just more aligned to how the stars commingle with the earth, because it's allowing the human presence to mold it into something that reflects the starlight of the being that's carving it. To some extent, their personal being, but I'm really not speaking of that. I'm speaking more of the being that is in a state of spiritual creativity when they do it, which puts it outside of saying, oh, well, so-and-so carved the skull, and, it should be his then and not mine. No, not if that person carved it with the intent of giving it out to the world. Then they're in a spiritual creativity state to do so. Now, let's face it, there's a lot of crystals out there that are being in crystal skulls. They're just doing it for the money, and they're, sitting there at their little wheel, and they're doing it, and they're carving it, and they're putting it out there, and they're getting paid for it. What about those skulls, and how can we know when one is carved like that and one is carved with a little more spiritual intent, even if they are getting paid for it, which they have certainly have a right to do? Well, we don't. We don't know that. Of course, when you hold the skull or the crystal, you're going to feel if there's a spiritual energy there that resonates with you. That's one way right there. And the other thing is that even if it was just carved, that's it. They just carved it, they got their money, and they left, and they went and carved another one. What are you putting into it? What are you designating to this skull? And that makes all the difference in the world. Now, there are some objects, whether they're crystal or anything else, cuckoo clocks, whatever, that have a lot of negative energy in them that have been built up through time. Two ways that can happen. If they've been in a house for 40, 50 years with a person or people who've had a lot of negative stuff going on in their lives, drugs, conflicts, murder, whatever, obviously that energy has the potential, doesn't always do it, to be absorbed into a particular object, especially if that object happens to be sitting on an earth node line that makes it more vulnerable to picking up the energies of what's going on around it for so many years, for so long a time, or maybe just one particular short period of time where an extreme amount of violence, like a murder or something, was committed. So obviously you don't want the cuckoo clock from Grandpa's house if Grandpa was found, murdered in the living room. I don't mean to laugh, but, what I mean is it's an obvious. You don't want something that comes out of some experience like that. But let's say you have something you don't know where it came from and you're feeling a really negative energy around it. I would suggest you don't try to cleanse it. You just get rid of it, and I wouldn't pass it on to someone else. What would you do with it? I would say if it's burnable, you burn it, and with saying a prayer of release through the heart. Love, not fear or not anger, just love. You burn it and bury the ashes. If it's not burnable, then you bury it, but you say a little prayer or whatever and just ask that, it be absorbed in the earth, whatever the negative energies are, and translated into transmuted light, something of that nature. So I would say that would be how you would handle something of that nature. Just like with a haunted house, or you wouldn't want to live in that either if it was haunted by beings that were troublesome or whatever, something that didn't agree with you. But those things are rare. I mean, we see a lot of it on TV and whatever, but really, the chances of you getting hold of an object of some kind that's really, really negative are few and far between. And if you do, you're probably going to know it right away. You're going to feel it. If you're sensitive and working with altars and energies and crystals, you're going to feel it. And so just pass it by, or if it's already in your care, do as I suggested and walk on, So let me think what else I might like to share with you here on this. Well, perhaps I should conclude by talking a little bit about what you actually want to do with your altar. Most of you probably know what you want to do with it. You're going to follow your inner guidance, and it's just going to lead you there. And you've probably had altars before and already know that. But for those of you who maybe have not had an altar before and are kind of just starting out with all of this, I would suggest that you do start very simply. Don't put a lot of different things on your altar. Just a few, maybe 2 or 3 crystals, a candle, something, and always include something that has a special personal significance to you. This is the beginner altar. We're talking about the beginner altar now. And I would suggest that you don't put it out there in the living room or anything. Your beginner altar should be in your bedroom or somewhere where it's just for you, and where it's not gonna be exposed to a lot of people. Not because it could get polluted or anything like that, but it will pick up other energies, and it might be a little confusing to your beginner status in this if you do that right away. So just keep it for yourself, and with like 2 or 3 crystals, or maybe a crystal skull if you're into crystal skulls, whatever, because even if you're not in the Osiris Rising Project, a crystal skull represents the human potential brain awareness, crown chakra, third eye, all these things, the vision, the speech. It's all tied up in the concept and the actual physical shape of a skull. So if you're going to work with a skull, or you're going to work with a crystal that's sitting there on your altar, and you have other things there as well, you can pick them up individually or touch them individually and work with them. Like just talk to them, say, speak to me, commune with me. I want to feel your energy and move back and forth. If there's any beings of light that are guardianing me and present with me, and they wish to work through this crystal or object, I allow them to do so now. I'm listening, I'm ready to receive. And it's good to do that actually before you go to bed at night, because then you're taking that into the dream time with you. And then think of the altar as a whole, because everything you put on there is working together as well. So you want it to feel harmonious, like this crystal and this skull and this candle and this tarot deck, whatever, all feels good together. It feels right. It doesn't just look good, it feels good. And then you can sort of stand back and feel the altar as a whole, and ask that whole presence of that altar that is really within you to be more active and more alive in you. And you can work with it that way. It might be neat for you to take some pictures of your altar every now and then. Even if you haven't changed anything on it, take another picture. Because when you take a picture, there's an exchange that goes on. And then you look at that picture. You can delete it later if you want, but just, look at it. Hold the presence with it for a few moments. Maybe keep it on your phone or camera for a while, and then you can delete it. It's moving through the ethers. It's getting exposed to other aspects of your environment that way, and your nature and your inner being. I would also highly recommend that you use essential oils with your altar, that you anoint your crystals and skulls and whatever with the oils on occasion, more than on occasion, frequently. And you can even keep some of the oils on the altar. I'm not keeping mine on the altar right now because I'm really needing them by my chair. I'm going through some things here with my physical body, and I need those oils present for me here. But I will go and anoint my skulls and crystals, with the oils. And so that's another thing you can do. Now, how do you find out what oils to use? Well, Again, work with your inner being. And I would caution you not to just go out and buy oils anywhere. Uh, Either my preferred and Thoth's preferred is Young Living. It's just the top of the top as far as I'm concerned. And Thoth was telling me this way back in the 1990s. However, there's also, oh my goodness, I can't, Genetera or something like that, that was once part of Young Living, and their oils are very good too, I hear. Something like that, really quality, and not just something you find, by shopping on Amazon, because they cut them, they don't, they don't work, they don't even diffuse them properly a lot of times, and that's why they're such cheap prices. So the good oils are the more expensive ones, but one little bottle lasts a long time, especially if you're just anointing yourself and the altar. Definitely anoint yourself as well. I left that part out. But, working with oils, you want to do both the altar, the crystals, and you. So, and then you can, if you use a specific oil a lot, like you anoint something or all of your altar with it, and then you anoint yourself, and you do this back and forth for some time, then you can use the same oil on yourself standing way out in the woods somewhere, and you don't have your altar with you, and you don't have your crystals, but you anoint yourself with that same oil that you've been using. And when you smell the oil and you put it on your body, where you always put it when you're standing in front of your altar, it's going to bring that energy quotient stronger into your field. Now, when we're talking about altars, we're not talking about some superstitious thing where, oh my gosh, if I don't have my altar just right, the boogeyman's going to come in and get me or something. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your inner living spirit and the things that trigger that. You see, when the world is created, so to speak, according to Thoth, objects, symbols, what we see with our physical eyes, all of these things trigger inner spiritual energies within us. So it's within us that we're really talking about, and not things lying out on the altar that are just objects. That said, objects are elemental matter, and crystals are even of a higher frequency than that, and they conform to the DNA in our bodies. So we have a reciprocity going on, especially with crystals, that are working with our DNA. So all of these things play a role. So when you use the oils, and you're used to using those oils, and then you go out in the woods, or, you take a trip to Italy or whatever, and you're standing on Mount Vesuvius in between eruptions, and, you want to bring forth more of that energy that you've been experiencing and working with at home with your altar, use the same oils and put them on the same places. Take your little bottle out and anoint yourself. And that's how it works with you, interacts. There's also feng shui, and I don't know very much at all about feng shui. I do know that Thoth has told me at times, well, it might be better for you if you turn your bed this way, or put the altar over here, the crystals there. I've received guidance from him, but I'm going blindly on that, in the sense of not understanding what feng shui is really about. I mean, how to do it. I understand what it is, but how to create it. So that's something you'd have to take up with someone else. But I do believe it is important to know if the energies are right where you want to set your altar up. Maybe this is the location you need to set it up, because this is the space you have. And if that's the case, set some things there and work with it and see what it feels like. If you feel a blockage, the energy is not moving right, you might want to consider taking a little extra time and effort and moving that chest of drawers or whatever into another location to set up your altar on it in another point in the room. You might just walk around, do a muscle test, walk around and find the right place in the room for it. But generally every time, most times, not every time, most times I have set crystals or things up in a place, it seemed to be the right place. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. So I'm not saying this is going to happen a lot, where you set it up and you go, no, this doesn't feel right. But with some people, at some times, it probably will. So you just need to find the right place and move things around for that. And then there is your portable altar. Well, I ported these crystals over to my lanai with a lot of help from my friends, but obviously I wouldn't be taking them very far, not this whole troop. But, you might have several select pieces from the altar that you could put in your backpack, and take with you. And once they have set on the altar for a long time, and you've been working with them and anointing them, and you take the oils with you as well, you can set them up in the motel room or whatever, and have a certain amount of activation with them there, or even hike up to a little spot, your favorite spot on a mountain trail or something, and place them there for an experience. And remember to bring your oils, because that helps to make that connection back home to the where you have the actual setup and the energy has been established and anchored. And then when you bring those crystals back with you, they contain that energy, of course, that frequency, not only of having been there, but having been there with you and working with you in a location, having an interactive exchange of spiritual presence with you at that time. And that comes back with you to your main altar. Well, I believe this concludes my video for today on altars and crystals. So I hope you have enjoyed it and it's been of beneficence to you in some way. And I will be making more videos in the future. Aloha.